Hello, my name is Craig Pierce, and I've been doing woodworking and veneer work for many years, as well as clock repair. Veneer work is easy to do. It's not as complicated as people believe it to be. However, there are several rules that you need to learn if you've never worked with veneer before. These two rules are very important. Never ever use veneer glue, which is basically a contact cement. You put it on the veneer, you put it on the substrate, roll it down, and the job is done. And another product to stay away from is paper-backed veneer. They're so thin, they have no sandability. Any little dirt that gets under them is going to show through. There are several things you're going to need to do veneer work. There's steel square, utility knife, a veneer saw, several chisels, and you need to sharpen your chisels often. And a straight edge. And another rule of mine is to keep your chisels sharp like razors, your saw sharp, and your utility knife, you may have to change the blade in that quite often. The project I'm going to be working on today is a door frame that has a lot of bad veneer on it. As you can see, I started to patch this veneer here, and the rest of it was so loose I decided to remove that also. The veneer we're using is quarter sliced rosewood veneer. It is 1/42 of an inch thick, so it's pretty thin, and it is very brittle. So we're going to have to learn how to work around this brittleness, cut the veneer, join the joints, and glue it down. So this is the veneer we're going to be using, and this is the door frame we're going to put the veneer on from here to here. As you'll notice, this is quarter sliced veneer, and as you can tell by the direction of the grain. I applied paper to the back of this veneer, which was easy to do. To apply paper to veneer that will split easily, take a sheet of paper, no brown paper bag or whatever, and coat it with hide glue, liquid hide glue. In this case, I didn't have liquid hide glue because I let it run out, so I used Elmer's white glue. The first thing I need to do is cut the veneer. Now the veneer has been papered and ready to go. I measure the width of the frame, and we're going to be running the grain perpendicular to the length of the frame. Now since this is end grain, we're cutting across the end grain, we're going to use a utility knife and a cutting board. The cutting board can be anything made out of soft pine. Do not use plywood because the knife will want to follow the grain and you will not get a nice even straight cut. One of the important things we have to do before we put the veneer in place, now the veneer has been cut, covered with paper, you need to wipe the surface down with some acetone. This is going to remove the oily substance from the veneer and make a better bond. Now if you're using the right solvent, you should get a purple color on your rag. Now with working with other woods, and you wipe it down, you may come up with a different color other than purple. If you don't come up with any color at all, you try a different solvent. Now the surface has been cleaned, free of oil, we need to glue it down within a reasonable length of time, preferably shortly after the solvent evaporates, because the oil will migrate back to the surface. Now when we cut this to width, we have to allow about 1/8 of an inch or more on each side. This door has one big problem that we're going to have to work around, and that's this piece that goes across. We have to notch this to go around it. So we lay our veneer up here with a little bit of overlap on each end. Overlap here and overlapping here. I'm going to mark this with a pen. And very carefully cut a notch in there. This notch is going to have to be cut with a utility knife. Just cut each corner edge end with downward pressure of the utility knife. Sometimes you gotta make several passes before the utility knife cuts completely through. It's also a good idea to change the utility knife blade from time to time so that it's always sharp. Well, let's see if it's gonna fit. Very nice clean fit. The next step is to mark the ends of the veneer. Using your veneer saw, trim off the edges of the veneer. Sometimes this cut's a little bit difficult with the paper, because the paper has a tendency to clog up the blade. Once again, we've got to test it for fit. We're going to have to trim just a little bit more off this end. Now be careful we don't trim too much. Since we are cutting with the grain, we can use a plane. Remove with just enough material that we get a nice, perfect fit. Another way of getting a good fit is to take a piece of 220 weather dry sandpaper or any kind of fine sandpaper will work. And start sanding across, removing a minute amount of veneer at a time. And keep testing for it fit. When the veneer feels like it's going down flush, with the veneer next to it, you have a nice fit. Now we have a nice fit on that end. Next, we have to fit the other end. And it's pretty close to where we want it, so we're going to take a plane and remove a little bit of veneer. When you're cutting with the grain, the plane works real well for fitting veneer. We still have the fit I'd like to have, so we're going to finish it up by sanding. Sometimes it's tough when you have paper on there to really see the fit. You have to depend mostly on your feel. Just a little tiny bit more. The next step is to fasten the veneer in place. To fasten the veneer in place, we're going to nail it in place. So we need a number 60 drill bit, drill some real fine holes through the veneer in multiple places, especially fairly close to the ends. You notice this veneer has already split on me once, so I have to be very careful that it doesn't split, come completely off. The reason it's drilling in holes is to help prevent splitting when we put the nails in place. I'm going to be using regular white glue, which I've had a lot of success in using over the past. It's water soluble. It dries sets fairly quickly. Easy to trim because it cuts fairly well. So we're going to glue our surface. It's important not to use too much glue, but make sure that everything is covered well with glue. We're going to lay the veneer in place using some very tiny brads, about some number 18. Fasten the veneer in place. This may seem kind of strange to you nailing it down, but it does work extremely well. Making sure we got a nice fit. These brads are probably a little longer than what we really need. These brads have very little to do with holding the veneer down. You want to make sure you drive them in there as straight as you can. If we need to trim the veneer, now is the time to do it. And this end needs to be trimmed just a little tiny bit with a piece of sandpaper. Now we need to cut the brads off. We ought to leave enough brad and we'll be able to grab a hold of them and pull them out when we're done. Now we have a nice fit on both ends. You can tape the ends down Using a little bit of masking tape. Use as little as possible. Normally I don't like using masking tape because when you remove it, once it's been clamped down, it usually tears out wood fibers. But in this case it's perfectly fine because we have finish here, with paper under the veneer, under the tape, so it'll be fairly easy to take off and remove. The next step is to install a call block. You want to make sure call block is not a lot bigger than what we're gluing the surface on. And that you use a softwood call block so you can push it down, sink the end of the pins into the call block. Using small clamps, slide the door over the edge so we can put the clamps in place. Just use small call blocks on the bottom, protect the wooden door frame from marks with the C-clamps. Start at one end and work your way to the other. Sometimes I like to start in the middle so any excess glue can be forced out and none is trapped in the middle. Three C-clamps should be sufficient. I'm going to move this clamp here a little closer to the center. This door has two more spots, so it's going to have to be repaired. One here and one there. But I'm going to wait until tomorrow to do that. So now we have to let this set till morning. Remove the call blocks. Use some paper, water, a damp rag. Remove all the paper and excess glue and trim the edges. The next step is we're going to repair this corner. Once again, we want to make sure the veneer runs perpendicular with the door frame. We're going to take a protractor and set it at a 45-degree angle. I like to use a fine pan, because it makes the marks so much easier to see. Using the trade edge, trim off the excess veneer on the line. This will be very, very difficult without the use of paper to keep it from splitting. And as you can see, we got a nice fit. You gotta trim it for length. Since we're using cutting across the grain, we're gonna use a utility knife. Sometimes it's nice to push down at the end of the veneer with the utility knife to make a cut to help prevent things from splitting when you go off the edge. And there you have your patch. Then we're going to do the same with this patch. As we did the other patch, we're going to drill a small hole in it, hold it in place. There's not a lot of room here to put a nail in this, so we're just going to tape it in place with masking tape. Put a small amount of glue in there. Wipe off as much excess glue as you can. Tape the patch in place with masking tape so it can't slip. And cover with a sheet of paper. And your call block. And clamp into place with a pinch clamp. This too, we have to leave set till morning. Now, yesterday we glued this veneer on and installed our clamps on the car block. We're going to remove the car block. And the clamps. Next, we're going to remove the brads we put in yesterday. I remember me telling you the brads will be taken out. You may think, well, it's going to put little tiny holes in the veneer, which it does. But during the finishing process, the sanding and the cleaning up the veneer with water, you will find that the holes will disappear. Now, yesterday I told you I don't normally like using masking tape because it will stick to the veneer very strongly once it has been clamped down. So if you need to remove the tape, pull the tape parallel with the surface. This has worked out good because there's finish on here. I probably could have done this without the masking tape, but it's much easier and better to make sure the ends don't curl up on you when gluing this down. And so far everything looks good. The next step is to remove the paper that was cemented to the veneer with a damp rag moistened with water. This takes a little effort. If I had used wood hide glue, it would be easier to remove, but I didn't have any. I let myself run out. Sometimes you gotta let this soak just a little tiny bit. Takes a little effort to clean this off. But if I used high glue, it would have been very, very sticky. I use the edge of my veneer saw to carefully scrape the paper from the veneer. You don't want to saturate it. Another thing I've used to help remove the glue is a Scotch-Brite pad. Like I said, you can use a Scotch-Brite pad. And you want to get the one in the department of the store where they sell cleaning supplies and dish detergent. You want to get the finer Scotch-Brite pad, not the real coarse stuff. It looks like we got a real nice tight fitting joint. You can see how nice it fits around here, how nice the joint fits here. Now what we're going to have to do, we have to remove the rest of the paper. I'll just dry for several hours. Trim off the edges. Sand the joints and make sure they're nice and flush. We have perfect fits. Also repair this corner and this corner up here. It's got a patch in it. When we get these patches sanded and finished, we may not have a perfect match, but it's going to be a lot better than what it was originally. Now that the veneer is dried and all the moisture is evaporated, we can proceed to trim off the excess veneer. To do that, we're going to use veneer saw. Now, when using the veneer saw, you always have to make sure that the veneer is backed up by a cutting board or a piece of pine or something. Otherwise, your veneer may split and break. And doing the ends, you always want to pull the saw toward you so it's cutting away from the corner. Hold the veneer saw parallel. There's a little glue on here, so it's going to cut a little hard. And then we have that side of the veneer all trimmed off. It's a little rough, a little ragged, but we're going to straighten that out shortly. Now the inside is going to be a little harder to do because there's not a lot of room for the veneer saw. We could trim off some of it. But I'm going to show you another trick I use for cutting end grain. It works real well in places where you can't get into it with a veneer saw, around a curve or something like that. Now this is another trick I learned many years ago, how to trim off veneer across the grain. This works extremely well for curved shapes or places where you can't get in with a veneer saw. I don't like using a utility knife because it can very easily cut into the wood and cut places where we don't want to remove wood. Push the chisel slightly, keep the chisel flat with the surface. Put slight forward pressure. Use your thumb or your hand and push the chisel sideways, creating a nice, quick shearing action. Some of your most important tools in veneering are your veneer saw and your chisel and a utility knife, so keep them all as sharp as you possibly can. Now we have to work the other direction, pushing slight pressure forward, move the chisel toward the work, and a nice shearing motion. Now you can see it doesn't make a perfect cut, but it's well good enough for what we're doing. Now we can take this back to the veneering bench. Now we got the veneer trimmed off, we can finish truing up the edges because you can see it's a little rough. There are places where you can catch it with your finger if you aren't careful. To do that, we use a block of wood and a piece of 80 grit sandpaper. And sand it till it's flush. And you're able to see that I removed some of the wood here. It's not flush here yet. It's flush there and here. And you do that, same thing to the inside edge. The edge is screwed up. You can see how nice and even everything is. You take some real fine sandpaper and just round off these edges. This is important because you don't want the edges to catch on something and get the splinters and stuff off. Just enough to round them off. And do the same on the inside. Now we can proceed to sand the veneer. I'm only going to use 220 sandpaper because this veneer is only 1/42 of an inch thick, so it's pretty darn thin. And notice how nice tight fitting joints we have. Everything is just about perfect. The next step is to try to stain it to match. The final step is to add the stain. Now I happen to find an oil-based stain that matches pretty close. This is a different kind of, this is exactly the same kind of wood as the rest of it. But it's going to look different because the old wood has finished on, has been on there for over 100 years, so it's not going to match perfect. The door on this clock is the exact same door I just put the veneer on and done the repair. It fits real nice. This is the clock it goes on. If you look real closely, you can see I made a repair from here to here. By mixing the right color stains and an airbrush, I was able to blend in the color precisely. And by the time I got the finish on, it's an almost unnoticeable repair. Right here where the repair was.
If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, or subscribe. Thanks for watching.